Hi everyone, welcome to today's lesson. It's following on from the Alla Prima painting we began last week. So this is still actually wet, but I've just split the lessons up for the sake of you guys being able to kind of take everything in into more manageable sizes. So, as I say, same place we left off. So we've got our toned panel, which was just kind of loosely rubbed over with burnt umber. Over the top of that we made our drawing of the fruit we're painting, so we've got a plum and a lemon. And as I said last week, we're going to be trying to mix colours that match our subject, and just kind of blocking them in. And that'll take about 20 or 25 minutes or so, and then subsequently the third lesson and the final lesson will be kind of refining those shapes and colours. So sort of developing the forms a bit more. We're going to try to block the form in a bit as we work, because we want to be as efficient as possible. But there'll be some subtleties that we'll get later in a second pass. The main thing we're trying to do is just make accurate colours, or kind of patch in accurate colours as our starting point, because it's a lot easier to kind of add those details if your colours are all roughly blocked in and your forms feel solid straight away. So I'm going to be using, I'm trying to look for my wet brush that I had from the last lesson. That one. There we go. So I'm going to be using two 1/8" brushes. Could use something a bit chunkier, but this is a pretty good compromise, and it just simplifies the number of brushes I have. I'm going to be cleaning them a bit as I work, because I'm not going to want to taint my yellows with my purples, something we'll be looking at. As far as palette's concerned, I'll go through each colour. So we've got titanium white. Try to get it on screen. It's got a little mound of titanium white there. Then got some cadmium yellow. Which will be a kind of base colour for the stronger yellows. Also got some yellow ochre, which will be a more muted yellows. Then we've got some alizarin crimson for the base for our plum, kind of purples. And that will be mixed with ultramarine blue to enhance the purples a bit, and finally we're going to have black as well. And I'll also put a little bit more burnt umber in onto the palette, because that'll be the base for a lot of the background colours as well. So there we go. And that's should probably be about enough paint, because we're not actually working on a very big panel today. Now, I generally recommend you kind of work from point of greatest difference, which means when I look at my reference and I look at this painting, the biggest difference is the yellow lemon. So I'm going to work on the lemon before I work on the plum. The plum's kind of a subtle adjustment from the burnt umber, the brownish burnt umber. So that could be kind of semi-glazed, and we'll mess around with that a bit. But the lemon needs to be quite a strong lemon yellow, which we'll use a lot of this cadmium yellow as we paint it on. So I can begin just quite thickly laying that yellow in. So I'm just working within the bounds of those shapes I established initially. This is going to be the lightest part of my kind of base color of the lemon. There is going to be a highlight, but that's going to be like a paler white. I'm going to look at building that up as well. And I'm going to just block this in and paint the highlight over the top, kind of into it. So I'm reasonably happy with that as our lemon yellow blocked in. At the same time I'm going to just enhance some of these shadows, so get some pure ivory black, because I want to start looking at what our darkest colours are going to be. So that ivory black will just sit in this shadow on the wood. And it can kind of loosen off a little bit as it gets towards the lemon, but then get darker again as it emerges from behind the other side of the lemon. Yeah, so that's not too bad. Now that I've established roughly this kind of average tone for the brightest part of the lemon, I'm going to start looking for what colours I need to mix just to tone it down a bit. So it can go a little bit more kind of orangey, perhaps. We don't want it to go too orange, because lemons do have a kind of somewhat greenish quality to them as they get darker. So I'm now just kind of wrapping these basic tones around, just developing the form as I want it to be. I don't want to go too dark with it because it actually stays reasonably kind of luminous, this lemon. And there is a little bit of reflected light just down this back edge as well. But that's something we'll probably look for in the third video. This one we're just kind of generally blocking in, so I'm sort of blurring my eyes. I'm just trying to get it to feel like approximately the right colours and forms. So I can stay pretty simple with what I'm doing. You can see it starting to come together quite nicely. don't want to overdo those details, kind of getting a little bit too caught up. Let's try to keep it simple, so I'm just going to work that back to a simple little shape that projects out. Yeah, it's not too bad. And we'll be painting some more complex stuff into that in the final session. But I might look for trying to get these darker lemon colours without compromising the hue, which can be a bit tricky with something like a lemon. No, it's not too bad. Just get them patched in, and that does give a little suggestion of the reflected colour as well. But yeah, not too bad, that lemon as it is. Then I can use some of those darker kind of greeny greys as the penumbra of this cast shadow, and then mix up the deepest part of the shadow as well. So it's not too bad, that general form of that lemon. As I say, we don't want to go too complex with it. It's tempting to. We just want to generally block in the necessary forms. And possibly look just a little bit, look for some of these colours as it would kind of wrap out from underneath. Obviously get a little bit of a turn coming out of the bottom of the lemon. Yeah, it's not too bad. So I'll leave the lemon at that, but I'm going to clean off my brush and pick up a little bit of white, because I also want to look for this highlight on the lemon. So there's a strong highlight, but I don't want it to feel weak, which is often a difficulty when putting a white highlight, because obviously the highlight is white, which is basically like a grey, and then the colours around it are higher chroma. So you need it to be a fairly kind of intense highlight, quite kind of almost pure white highlight to work and be kind of reasonably discreet from the rest of the lemon. So something like that's not too bad as a starting point. Yeah, and we can pretty much, I'll just drop back down and get some more lemony colours. We can pretty much leave the lemon at that point. And we'll get back to it in the next lesson. Yeah, I'm falling prey to the temptation to mess around with it, but I'll do that and leave it for now, I think. it's not too bad. And then I'll drop back to my burnt umber, and I just want to alter the shape of it a little. It feels a little bit not quite the right shape to me, so we can mess around with it a little bit. Too bad. We're going to go in and rework that in the next session, but we can roughly leave it as it is for the time being. And we can now swap to working on our plum. Which is going to require a more subtle shift from the brown that we're working as our base layer. So it should be a little bit easier, I think. And we're going to pick up a little bit of alizarin crimson, so you can see that's a nice kind of pinkish colour. And again, we can maybe start with looking at roughly what these lighter parts of the plum are going to look like. So I can try to find out what this kind of most intense version of this pink could be and how it sits relative to these other plummy colours. Yeah, not too bad. We're going to want it to, as it gets darker though, get lower chroma, so we can start mixing a little bit of our burnt umber in, and that'll kind of brown off these colours. So you can see that works quite well as we kind of start to patch it in. Can be a bit more carefree with this one. It's slightly easier tones to work with, these reds to shift around. So you'll find certain types of colours or textures or forms will be easier than others. This is certainly a lot easier than the lemon, I would say. And then we've got a little bit more of a shape there, kind of wrapping over slightly. Then I'm going to swap back to my dark colour, and I'm going to mix my alizarin crimson with black, and that's going to be so it can now start to feed these forms in a little bit from that shadow. Yeah, not too bad. And can look for a little bit of a kind of reflected light on the inside of that plum. Yeah, it's quite good. So as you can see, that one happened to just work a bit more quickly than the other. I was expecting it would be a little bit easier, just because I know from experience that lemons, kind of lemon yellows, can sometimes be a bit tricky to handle. But yeah, that's not too bad as the plum, actually. Obviously, again, we want to look for our highlight, so I'm going to mix a little bit of pure alizarin crimson with white, kind of look A little bit more lightness in this highlight on the plum. Yeah, that's not too bad. It's got quite a kind of crisp little turn across here, and then just on top of that is a pure white highlight, which can be quite tricky to do in Alla Prima if you're doing them over the top of something that's already dry. They tend to feed in a bit more straightforward way. Sometimes I have to fiddle around with them and some working with some pure alizarin crimson kind of. Yeah, it's starting to have a nice little glow. Just trying to get this highlight to work how I want it. Yeah, it's not too bad. Probably could leave it at that as a suggestion of the highlight, and then there's another little one just there on the other side of the plum. And then there's also a little bit kind of a highlight running along this rim here. Yeah, that works quite well. Yeah, not too bad, those forms. Yeah, that's not too bad. So yeah, I'm reasonably happy with that, just for the blocking of the fruit. So you can see it takes maybe about 20-25 minutes, something of that complexity. And then the next step will just be to go back, rework the background, try to add a few little bits of detail to the fruit, get it a bit more specific, but it's not a bad start. So we'll just be using some smaller brushes for the fruit, altering some of the textures in the table, looking for some reflections, and that'll pretty much finish it off. But again, I'll put a little bit of kind of advice, tips about how to go about this stage on the blog and on the OCAD course page. And I'll see you guys next week. As always, follow the YouTube, keep up to date with what's going on, and I look forward to seeing you for the final video in this series. So I'll see you guys soon.